We're going to go ahead and get started here. Welcome to the Winds, Water, and Wildfires Summit for the Northeast, Day 2. Thank you so much for joining us today, and also for the nice discussion over our coffee clutch this morning. Nice to see the berries that Pooh had behind his screen there, and visit with folks and hear about your calves, Kurt. So, just a couple of housekeeping things, and then we'll jump into the recap. Leanne, first, I want everyone to know we're recording, and please keep your microphone on mute if you're not speaking, and also turn off your cameras if we're doing some videos and such. It helps quite a bit, please put any questions in chat or anything that you'd like to say and share with the presenters or the panelists and other attendees. I really want for today's sessions to be really interactive and get your input on how you think that conservation districts can engage with, implementing the goals of the cohesive strategy. Again, restore and maintain resilient landscapes, creating fire adapted or prepared communities, and building safe and effective fire response or emergency response. Those are all really key things. And even though fire is in the name of the cohesive fire strategy, really is about helping communities at the local level. And I think conservation districts are the key connection to those private landowners. And I really think we can move the dial and implementing the cohesive strategy with your help. So with that, Mike, did I miss anything?
I think you're good.
All right, thanks. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Leanne, for welcome and recap of day one, and I'll help you.
Sure, thank you, Ann, and thank you, Mike, from the National Association of Conservation Districts. Again, I'm Leanne Buck, and I serve as the Executive Director for the Minnesota Association of Soil and Water Conservation Districts. And so one of the things I was asked to do this morning was just kind of recap, because we saw this as a two-part session, and we knew we had a full day yesterday in the morning, and having another full day of great speakers and kind of exchanging information. So I'm learning as we go here. And also looking forward to kind of providing that SWCD, or in Minnesota we call them Soil and Water Conservation Districts, but I'll call it Conservation Districts for short. So one of the things I just want to say, kind of my assessment is, again, NACD, the National Association of Conservation Districts, is being proactive by providing this forum for information exchange between, again, our local, state, and federal partners. Some of them are new partners to us, some of them are definitely old partners. And I love this opportunity of engaging and learning. We're also highlighting the National Cohesive Wildlife Strategy. And when I look at that, I saw that as, again, I thank the folks for kind of providing us with the understanding that this is under the umbrella of a federal partnership with the Department of Interior as well as the USDA. And obviously, any type of strategy that's built at a national level, even at a local level, it's going to have numerous partners and strategies. And as soil and water districts, we also know that location matters geographically. In Minnesota, we look at it at a local level, we look at it at a watershed level, we look at state level, county level, national level, et cetera. So again, for the Northeast region that we're highlighting today is the 20 states in the Northeast region of part of the country. And we know that the plan should be different for those regions. And not to mention that some of that is going to be different at the local level. So I also want to think about what Ann had mentioned too. Again, when we look at this national strategy, we're really trying to highlight that resilient landscape, fire adapted communities, and safe and effective wildfire response. And also what was fun to hear and listen to, and I think we all know it, and it just reiterates it, that at all levels, we're talking about changes to our climate that has a big push on policy. It has a big push on funding. It has a big push probably in the next farm bill for those of us that work with our USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service friends. So again, we know the climate changes are coming, they're getting elevated, and trying to understand what's the same and what is different. But obviously, healthy forest and ongoing management of our forestry and wildfire preparedness are all the issues when we look at forestry landscapes, so the climates and carbon storage as well. There's a big push to, across our state to, whatever the number is, millions of more trees is the hope for this carbon storage. Well, what does that mean for ongoing forestry management? I also heard yesterday, we're thinking about, post-COVID and new trends as people can have more flexibility on where they work, where they live, how they commute. It may trigger land use changes, especially in our rural and natural areas. So with those changes coming for conservation districts, we may have different policy drivers. So in Minnesota, when you have 10,000 lakes, you can imagine the amount of policy that's driven by whether it's on a federal level, our NRCS folks with Farm Bill, whether it's EPA through the Clean Water Act that funnels down to our state, as well as, but again, if we're looking at water quality, we still look at forestry landscapes for that protection. And so then how do we look at some of these? I got the Covey book, the 7 habits. And of course, one of them is the potential win-win scenarios. How do we look at maybe for some of us at a local level that are pushed by water quality and other forestry pieces? How do we look at it from wildfire? And obviously they all connect. So again, trying to decide these win-win scenarios. We also heard yesterday of examples of how SWCDs and our state partners are, my phone just went off. So we heard examples of how SWCDs are addressing forestry health and how our conservation districts can assist with emergency management. We're connected locally, we're meeting those needs. So there's a lot of local autonomy, a local adaptability. And what I also heard yesterday, there are numerous partners that have a wide variety of resources. And then I also want to come back to, and I want to emphasize, conservation districts have that local infrastructure. And as I mentioned earlier in my opening comments yesterday, all politics are local. So when you're trying to meet the needs of the local concerns, how do you take a major, large strategy and build that into the local infrastructure and that understanding? So again, looking for those win-win scenarios. So as we continue to have and think about our national strategy and implementing it at a regional level, state and local level, I continue to think about, and I think that's what we're going to get into today, is how do we enhance the conservation district role? And I'm going to think about it in terms of local ownership of a plan. We have a lot of planning efforts in Minnesota. And so the big piece of it is one thing to have a plan. It's another to have local ownership of a plan. It's another to sustain the plan. And most importantly, implementation of the plan. All the hard work that I've talked about with planning process, the hardest part is implementing the plan. So I'm going to look at it from what can I do to help my districts in a programmatic approach that includes whether it's referencing to incorporating into existing plans. I don't want to start new planning processes. How do I look at that outreach and financial and technical assistance in a programmatic approach that the districts can continue to maintain as we look at our forestry health and our forestry activities? So that's my takeaway on yesterday, and I look forward to continuing that strategic discussion today. So I'll turn it back over to Ann. And again, I want to thank the National Association of Conservation Districts for providing this forum and helping all of us learn from each other and our partners. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leanne. I appreciate that. That was a great recap. And I know we ran short and didn't have an opportunity for too many questions yesterday. And so I took a couple of notes from the presentations that we had yesterday and wanted to go through some of the actions that I saw in the presentations and wanted to share those with folks today. It basically tiers to exactly what you said, Leanne. You know, the hard work comes into implementing no matter what plan it is, whether it's, you know, a local community wildfire protection plan or you have an emergency response plan and you call it something else. Chances are, you know, the folks have been in the conservation districts already have been in conversations with the private landowners. And in some areas, they have been in conversations with local emergency managers. But I think from what I heard in some of the comments yesterday, that wasn't necessarily the case. And a lot of the times, if you are trying to engage in a new planning process, or your community has had a disaster or an event where you've had to pull people together, it's very difficult sometimes with those relationships. And so the key takeaway, I think, from all of them, all the presentations yesterday and those experiences, is that you really need to try to have that relationship early. And if it means going into the emergency manager's office and introducing yourself, we hope that you will do that. And in Denise's presentation, she had that experience of being in the Emergency Operations Center, knowing what expertise is at the Conservation District level. That's just not the case in a lot of Emergency Operations Centers, from my experiences in talking with folks in the different regions across the country. And they wish they had someone that had some of the expertise on, like, the gauges, the stream gauges, and how to use that information. I think it would be a huge benefit to have conservation district knowledge and experience brought into those discussions with emergency managers way ahead of the time than during an event when you don't really think about what the key things are that you could utilize. So that was definitely one takeaway and one key action that I think we can move forward coming out of this summit. Another one that I felt was really important, I mentioned earlier, and that was the Fema Connection. There's a lot of interest in that funding, as I said, and it is definitely something that conservation districts can help with. And a lot of the times you're aware of what the needs are for infrastructure in an area, whether it's flood control or a dry hydrant. Those types of things can be funded with that BRIC program, if I'm not mistaken. And just trying to get a simplistic process in place that folks can follow to get in the door and get accomplishments done, and an ease of reporting, I think is really critical. So the more that we can do about that, I think that will be most helpful on the ground. The presentations that were given by the State Fire Marshal's office, and I want to tie in what Dakota County Commissioner in Minnesota, Mary, had to say, really does tie in the local engagement piece. And Leanne, politics are local, and Mayor Mary at the time, being a co-author of the cohesive strategy, hit that home too years ago when we were writing it. So implementation of it still has to keep that thread in place. And Bob, I appreciated your comment in the chat just now. The local ownership is crucial. I've helped write hundreds of plans, community wildfire protection plans, and the work begins when the plan is done, and the land has not changed most often, while they were writing it. And yet everybody feels a sense of accomplishment that they've done something, and they have a huge lift. But the work really begins on the ground, and that's where I want to tie to the Firewise program, Firewise USA, and the cautionary statement that Megan had made about Firewise principles versus Firewise the program. They're very different, and yet it's a key term that helps people understand that they need to do something about their house. But just having that idea doesn't get their house to be more resilient, or able to withstand fire. And that's, I think, the biggest key, is actually making changes and doing the work around your home, defensible space. Those programs that the State Fire Marshal's Office and the DNR, with what Casey said, and Bob, everybody, it really has to come together to work in a community at a level and the number of homes that are easy to work with, or easier to have a network where there's already leadership. Maybe it's an HOA and a homeowners association. And I think that would be a good way to try to move forward on it. And changing the dynamic on the ground at people's homes is what's going to make the difference. Lindbergh, what I thought you had in the group that you helped with Dan and John, with the landscape, prioritizing areas is critical with the limited number of resources and the different paths for money to address your priorities. Getting on the same page is what the cohesive strategy was all about. So if you're using the same terminology, or you're able to put a framework to what your plans already say, it just gets it so that people understand clearly what it is you're doing. The more you can educate others about that, I think is really critical. And it shows the accomplishment that you're doing, but it's also educating people on how they can move forward and do more things in their neighborhoods or in their assessment processes. And I think we'll hear more about different tools and tips for the Northeast region of how to get information into your planning projects to help you identify the risks, identify who your partners are with the different tools and such that you'll hear about later. I'm sorry to go on so long, but there's just so many things that came out of yesterday's presentation, and I didn't want to skip over those. I was hoping that folks today, if you didn't attend yesterday, there'll be recordings for the sessions, and those will be online on the NACD website probably next week, I'm hoping. And I encourage you to go back and take a look at those. I'll be sending out an email to the group too when we have those available. As I was talking about the assessments and that type of information, I want to tee up our next presenter, and with the cohesive strategy, kind of how to apply it in the Northeast. And the assessment is one piece of it. And I see that Larry is on, and with that, before I hand it over to Larry to start early on the how to apply it, I want to make sure that if there are any questions in the chat, or if there was anything that I missed, or if folks just want to open up your mic and have anything to say about the recap and welcome. Thank you, John, in the chat. I appreciate your comment about it is a busy time of year, and it's good that we do have a virtual option, and it does help a lot. I think having the numbers of folks on yesterday, I think we were 60-some people yesterday. I think I know that we didn't necessarily plan on having that many when it was going to be in person, just because of limitations and such with facilities. And travel funds are tough to come by sometimes. So I definitely like the virtual option as well, and glad that you added that comment. Thank you. And Dr. Kelly, I appreciate yours too. And you're welcome. Okay. Not seeing any other comments in here. I will go ahead, and Larry, if you and Chris with the Timmons Group, if you guys are ready, turn it over to you.
Okay.
Chris and Chris.
This is Larry. Thanks again for having us on there to talk about the cohesive strategy with the NACD folks. Can you see the screen okay, Ann? Yes. Okay. Yeah, well, building on yesterday's talks and the recap this morning, want to move forward and talk a little bit more about something I mentioned yesterday that's ongoing in the Northeast region. and that's the wildfire risk assessment and the development of the portal to help deliver that assessment. And I just want to share a few thoughts to sort of kick this off before I turn it over to the Timmins Group folks, who I'll introduce in a minute. But just kind of moving towards talking about applying the cohesive strategy in the Northeast Midwest. Some thoughts are obviously, we've been talking about how the cohesive strategy is designed to promote a balanced approach to the three goals, and underlined by the collaboration among partners. That's a key mechanism for getting it done. In the Northeast Midwest, especially in our region, addressing wildfire risk, we believe should be done in the context of all hazard planning and mitigation. As you know, floods, tornadoes, hurricanes, ice storms, forest pest outbreaks, and so on, all contribute to a buildup of hazardous fuel situations in some places. So addressing wildfire risk in the context of the entire landscape and in terms of other hazardous events are key for how we do work in the Northeast. So there's lots of planning and treatments that can contribute to reducing the risk and addressing some of the impacts from some of these events. And these include things like forest thinning and mowing and chipping and creating fuel breaks and prescribed fire or controlled burning. All these things can help manage the landscape, especially around communities. And as was mentioned, funding and resources are always scarce. So it's really important that when we put together plans like the CWPPs or Firewise or things like that, that we have the best information that's available to us. And so it's kind of exciting in the Northeast, while we're the last part of the country to get an in-depth all lands wildfire risk assessment. We're building on the what's happened in the other parts of the country and learning from their use and the advances in technology to bring the best information available to folks at all levels, regional, state, and local, to help with their planning processes and actually tracking implementation. So I'm gonna, here in a minute, I'm gonna turn it over to Chris Gorenke and Chris Lutz from the Timmins Group, who are instrumental in helping us build the portal, this wildfire risk assessment portal. It's really a set of tools that'll help us bring the in-depth wildfire risk assessment information that's being developed. And so I think you'll find it interesting to see what kind of tools are going to be available on the horizon to help us with all the planning and implementation work that's going to take to implement the cohesive strategy. So with that, let me turn it over to, I guess Chris Lutz is up next, and he's going to start a little bit of a demo on what the portal looks like. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah, so go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. Actually, the other Chris will jump in. So I'm Chris Garrett from Timmins Group, and so Chris Lutz and I will be actually demoing 4 applications over the next, I would say, 20-30 minutes here. And Larry, really appreciate the introduction, and wanted to build off of what Larry said and kind of show you guys where we're taking the Northeast risk assessment and some of those outputs and putting those into a viewer. So I'm going to start by demoing that application, and then we'll go into another related application as part of that effort, and then I'll turn it back over to Chris Lutz, or over to Chris Lutz, and he'll be demoing an application built for the Arizona Association of Conservation Districts, which will give you a little bit of a sneak peek into some tools that we have developed for them. And then I'll turn it back around and kind of hit where Anna was going with shared stewardship and talk about an application we developed for more on the national level. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And so what you see here is, let me scroll to the top. This is, as Larry mentioned, Timmons Group is working with the Northeast Midwest State Foresters Alliance and the RSC to develop a portal that's going to take the risk assessment data and make it available for users. And so it's web enabling all of that data. And that data is actually, a risk assessment is still in progress. So what you see here is actually a development site. We're working on it iteratively as we wait for the risk assessment data to be produced by Pyrologic. So this is really a sneak peek into what you'll be getting, let's say, early fall. We don't have an exact date yet, but that's what we're shooting for based on the risk assessment data being available. So this is the portal, and I'll kind of scroll through it, but when you first land here as a user, you'll get access to resources, information about how to get your wildfire risk, just a general assessment. And then we're developing two main tools for the Northeast. One is the Risk Explorer, which I'll go into briefly here, and then the Community Assessor, which development has not started for that application yet, but we developed something very similar for the Southeast. So I'll kind of go through that, and we'll talk about how that's helping communities or helping states and HOAs and local fire departments provide community mapping, build out CWPPs, generate reports, and support the development of FireWise and CWPP development. So these are the two tools that will be available through this portal. And so through this portal, you'll see this term called the Risk Explorer, and that is where a user can access the risk assessment data. So you'll notice a little window here that asks you to choose a viewer. So we have two really flavors of the Risk Explorer. So there's the basic and advanced. Basic is really suited for homeowners, landowners, the general public to get information about their risk to wildfire. And then the advanced is better suited for you folks, emergency managers, natural resource professionals, wildland fire response individuals, conservation districts, people who are actually doing work and want to do more project analysis. And I'll go into how that will work. So I'll first enter the basic viewer. And what you'll see here is, zoom to the Northeast extent, and the assess your location feature is going to be built out. It's not built out yet, but that will provide users a quick ability to enter an address or zoom to a location on the map and get an assessment of their risk based on, and some general precautions and preparations. So from a landowner perspective, what can they do to help mitigate the risk for wildfire based on the risk value that comes out of the risk assessment. So what we've done is, just for initial purposes, is we pulled the wildfire risk for communities data at the national level, and we're using that as a proxy until the Northeast data is available. But this will give you a flavor of what kind of features are available. And we'll have many more layers that will be outputs of the Northeast risk assessment in here, and then many more reference layers. So we're talking about putting forest health data in here, different natural resource data, watershed data, a lot of data that you as users could use to help provide context to locational wildfire risk. So you can zoom in, and there's many tools in here which I won't go into for the sake of time, but ability to kind of overlay risk assessment data with vector layers, basically a portal to kind of bring all this data together into one accessible viewer. I'm going to sign in now as an advanced user. So this is more suited for probably for folks like yourselves, professionals. And when both viewers are freely accessible, the advanced viewer, however, does require you to associate yourself with an organization. So we have this concept of organizations, and you can see right now I'm associated to New York. I'm not in New York, but I just happen to be, for test purposes, associated to New York. And so we're going to be setting up over the next few months different organizations as part of this, and it's going to be all the northeastern states, but it can also be federal agencies, it could be NGOs, it could be local organizations. And the advantage there is you get Zoom to the extent of your organization, and there's some branding associated to this advanced viewer. But the main differences with these tools are you're able to create an area of interest, and so, or a project. And the main outputs of those, creating an area of interest or a project, is to be able to, you can create a risk summary report, which is essentially a CWPP starter output, or download specific data. So I'll provide a quick example of that, which I have a report that we developed for Utah, and hopefully everybody can see this. This is the output of your area of the area of interest tool. So what it does is it actually cores through a specific project area that you delineate and provides information about the different layers associated in the risk assessment. So you can see here, this is an area of interest. It's going to produce maps, graphs, charts, acreage per your area of interest for each of those data layers. So in this case, it's wildfire threat, wildfire risk, aggregate values, impacts, all the HVRA data that's part of that risk assessment will be able to be output from this. So that's a really quick introduction to what this tool will provide. And happy to take questions probably after this and dig a little bit more into this. But again, this tool is in development, and once the risk assessment data is in here, we'll have a lot more features and progress to show you all. Now, what I wanted to do here is switch over to talking a little bit about another tool we're developing for the Northeast as part of this project. And go ahead and sign out, and I'll show you, how you might access this. So this tool, again, it's called the Community Assessor, and it's going to be accessible for specific users because it has a purpose for community mapping, mobile hazard assessment, and ratings specific to, at this point, wild and urban interface coordinators, forestry agencies, HOAs, volunteer fire departments, but could be expanded to more of an all hazards type of purpose. So I'm going to pop over to, since we don't have this in development yet for the Northeast, I'm going to pop over to a PowerPoint, which will talk about what we've developed for the Southeast. So this is available in the Southeast, and a very, very similar project will be developed for the Northeast. Let me swap presenter views. And Chris, you can see this, correct? The PowerPoint?
Yes, you're good.
All right. Just want to make sure everybody can see it. So the key goals of this Community Assessor, again, the module that will be developed for the whole Northeast, is to enable states to perform community hazard assessments. You'll be able to map communities at risk. There's a mobile app that actually allows you to do wildfire risk assessments at the community level in the field. And then there's the output is reports that could be used for CWPP development, FireWise recognition. And then what we've done is standardize those community or that risk assessment methodology kind of across the South, and we're going to push that into the Northeast as well with some modifications. And that actually will integrate with the wildfire risk assessment portal I just showed. So I noticed a few questions on the chat and didn't get into it, but it just happens that this tool does align with some of the performance measures and outcomes that came out of the NASF and state and private forestry performance measures project that we helped lead. So one of the stories that came out of that was people are safer when communities are more fire adapted, and then 18 performance measure candidates came out of that project. And so this application actually helps develop outcomes, towards these performance measures that you see on the screen. So I'm going to do a quick demo of what this application is. Again, this is a Southeast demo, but this similar product will be developed for the Northeast. So the idea here is now I'm in this tool, and you'll be able to, or users of the tool in the Northeast, again, associated to organizations. So each state will have access, or each organization within the Northeast will have access to this tool. And they can create projects or search for, in this case, search for existing projects. And those projects can be named associated to cities and counties, and associate the project types, whether it's a CWPP or a FireWise project. And then project members can be invited to those projects and collaborate together as part of this community identification and community CWPP development. So as part of this project, I can create a community, and spatially, in this case, I'm digitizing or sketching out that boundary for my community, and then naming it. And then I can start an assessment, or start a risk assessment. And this can be done on the web or mobile. In this case, I'm just showing how it's done in the field, because a lot of this, at this point, a lot of the risk assessments are pushed over to the volunteer fire departments, HOAs. Some of the WUI coordinators do actually go out and do these assessments as well. But this allows you to get out in the field and capture information about that risk assessment. So I'll just quickly kind of scroll through these, but you have the ability to map that assessment in the field if it's not already mapped back in the office, and then add some details about that assessment, enter in details about suppression, things like ingress and egress, road width, accessibility, street signs. So essentially it's walking a user through questions about that risk assessment. And I won't go through all these. There's 9 categories about surrounding environment, 11 categories specific to structures in that community, and then the ability to take photos per assessment. And all that is rolled up into a rating, an assessment rating for that community. And then those assessments get synced up to the web, and now we're back on the website. So you can see all that assessment is now associated to the community, and you can get mitigation strategies. You can download those individual community assessment reports, which can go right into a CWPP. There's the recommended mitigation strategies based on that risk assessment rating that was generated. And then you can see here that multiple communities can be associated to a project. And so you can see these different colors are based on ratings. The high assessment here is in orange, and these are 3 different communities, or 4 different communities down here. And I can associate a CWPP report to that. And then also I can get a project assessment report. And the end result of this is, so all this work done to assess communities is actually pushed back into the viewer you saw. So when I first started the demo, associating when I showed the viewer, the basic viewer and the advanced viewer, all the risk assessment data in the South, and will be in the Northeast, is now available for the general public or for advanced users to see. And so here what you're seeing is an assessment created in the Community Assessor, available in the basic viewer. And I can get basic information about that hazard rating and the project name. And this really provides a better way to marry those communities, the landscapes and response, and help better prioritize where you should focus funding and manpower. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Lutz, and we're going to talk a little bit about a conservation district specific app that we've developed. And stop sharing.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Chris. So we were given the opportunity to work with the Arizona Association of Conservation Districts. They were partnered with the NRCS to come up with this portal to help them kind of plan and mitigate what's going on within Arizona. So the challenges that they were facing, and I think a lot of you face just with all these different risk assessments that have to be done, resource data is not always available to everyone and easily shareable to stakeholders. So with these portals, we want to be able to quickly allow people to see tons of data and share that out to others so that they all have a comprehensive view of what's going on within a state or locality. Another piece that they were struggling with that we wanted to help with is the planning aspect of it. So now that they can see all this data, they can spend some time understanding where at-risk places might be, start mapping them out on in a map so that they can then plan for any sort of mitigation strategies or for funding that might need to come along with it. The other piece that it was difficult in Arizona, and I'm sure across the nation, is the collaboration piece of it. It's pretty difficult to collaborate between the different types of organizations, or just getting people to work collaboratively together to come up with these applications that will work for many sorts of jobs and opportunities. And then the last piece that we try to focus on is showing the impact of accomplishments. So these will give people the opportunity to see the information in a new light and hopefully give them insight into ways that they can then continue to mitigate and plan. So the assessment portal that we've been creating, they provide the easy access to the rich data, facilitate cross-jurisdiction collaborative conservation actions, and then we also visually summarize information showing what's going on with conservation. So the story that we have been working towards is giving people these the ability to view and assess landscapes through maps and data. With the ability to assess what's going on visually, you can then start to prioritize where things are either at most at risk or where the focus needs to be given. So then once you start doing the work, we want to give you that planning aspect so that you can draw on the map, here's my area of interest, or here's this project that I want to focus on, so that we can continue to make sure that things are going in the right direction. And then showing the outcomes. So like I said before, we have all this data now and we're able to do those assessments and give priority to it. We can show visually what that will look like. And the way that we've been doing that is through dashboards. And so dashboards just give you a way to see what's going on at a greater level, while also showing you how things can look when you have all the data in place. So the piece that we're trying to help facilitate is this idea of getting out of the different silos. Everyone has their own organization, but with conservation districts, you all need to have the ability to get into conversations with the larger organizations or even localities and things like that. So the idea is that we want to break down those silos and get all the people involved and give them the opportunity to view information from a cohesive boundary. So what Arizona's focus was for this was a district-wide conservation action plan. And so what this portal does for them is gets them set up to create these plans. They use NRCS data along with a few other sources to be able to get everything into one place, identify what things look like currently, what they might look in the future, and then from there they can start to really do the assessment piece of it. So giving focus to research concerns and practices and planning for future mitigation and just helping them conserve the land that they have in Arizona. So I'm going to jump into the demo of the portal real fast and show you all what we've done so far and where we're going in the future. So once you come into the application, it's very map focused so that you can easily see everything in one place and not jumping around to too many different places. The first thing that everyone will be able to see is this inventory section over here on the left side. And what the inventory is in Arizona is basically any sort of data that they've deemed necessary for any sort of conservation action. So we have these different sections here that are collapsible because they have a ton of data in here. And each of them can be turned on or off and give people the perspective that they need in order to make whatever decisions are necessary. And so each of these sections, some of it's more just reference, other pieces are much more comprehensive. So something that we really focused on was the vegetation change within Arizona. We had to do a bunch of data work in order to give Arizona the screen that they needed to see with this information. So you can see here, I'll zoom in a little bit. We have identified all of the vegetation change that has happened within Arizona using a few different layers that were existing and using historic data and also ecological sites. It was a lot of work to figure it all out, but ultimately it gives Arizona the ability to see how the landscape has changed over time. And so this legend piece here, it will show everything that is turned on in the map and give you representation of what you're seeing. You can decipher from there what is going on the map. Another piece that we added here for people is this identify. This identify is used to give people the information that they might need in order to make those decisions or just understand what's going on in the map. So here, this is our Conserve AZ area of interest layer. This is something that we'll get into in just a minute. But as you can see, there's quite a few already on here, and you can see the name and what kind of area of interest it is, be able to zoom into those particular places. And then also using the conservation district boundary, letting you know what district you're looking at, being able to quickly zoom in and out to those. So it's just an easy way to give the users easy information quickly. All right, so getting into the main focus for this application is to be able to draw your areas of interest so you can start planning where you want to put focus. So we have two ways of creating areas of interest currently. Drawing, which is simple, just you draw what you want to, whatever area you have on the map, and you can save that information. You can draw additional shapes so that if you have multiple areas that you want to link together, then you can do that as well. And then once you're ready to save your area of interest, quickly just give it a name, and then we can go into how to manage that area of interest. Okay, so the other way that you can create areas of interest is by using existing features. So for example, if I wanted to use the conservation district boundary, I can select that, and it will highlight that whole boundary as my area of interest, and I can create it from that layer. So in Arizona, they were very focused on being able to do it by district boundaries in HUC watersheds, so that they can really focus their energies on those two forms. So moving on from there, where they want to spend a lot of their time right now is getting information associated to these areas of interest. So right now, we don't have a ton of information, but what we're working towards is giving them the ability to identify who the stakeholder is within the area of interest. So BLM, conservation district, producers, those types of information, and also give them the ability to prioritize what these areas of interest are. So they'll be able to give it a high, medium, or low priority, so that then they can have a full understanding of what areas of interest might be high for some people with certain stakeholders, and then also adding the resource concerns related to this area of interest. So we have the full list of NRCS resource concerns here in this list, and you can add as many as you want to this particular area of interest. And our next step will be to add practices along with these resource concerns. So each resource concern will have multiple practices and also be able to identify certain project areas within them. So we're still working through some stuff, but ultimately they're going to have a really nice application to plan and track what's going on the ground with these different stakeholders. The last piece that I want to show you is the dashboard. So I told you a little bit about it before, but ultimately this is a live demonstration of the vegetation change that is going on within Arizona in a more friendly manner. So we used the vegetation departure data layer and created the two sets of visualizations, one for conservation districts and one for HUC 10s. With each of those, you can see the high level information about the acres of vegetation departure, the study area, what the types of vegetation departure were, and then you can also click on specific conservation districts and see that information in a more data-driven way. So the total acres, what percentage of the conservation district had departure, and then the breakdown of each of the departure types. The same goes for the HUC 10s. It's just another way of visualizing the same kind of data at a little bit more finer scale. So with all this information, Arizona has been able to really use it and utilize it for their conservation action plans, giving them all this information in one place rather than having to go between a bunch of different sources and things like that. They've really enjoyed figuring out how to utilize this and give people better information. One piece that I did forget to mention was this reports piece. We do generate reports for them, and they've broken them out into different sections because people have different priorities. But the idea is each of these reports will have a map, a legend, source information, and some of them will also have the breakdown in a table format. So you can see exactly how many acres of is managed by BLM or private or whatnot, so that it gives them the ability to take all this information and easily pop it into any sort of reports that they need to do on their end. So like I said before, Arizona is still continuously working on this and adding new functionality as we go. So hopefully in the next couple of months, we'll have some new features to show, and we'll go from there. And I think we're a little bit short on time, but might pass it over to Chris for the next piece.
Yeah, we are a little bit short on time. So I was going to do a demonstration of the shared wildlife mitigation tool that we have prototyped for the Forest Service and for state and private forestry. But I think we're really low on time, and just as a quick kind of intro to it, this tool is another tool that we're trying to develop for stakeholders to facilitate cross-jurisdictional collaborative action and create increased transparency and trust, and basically sharing information spatially. And so I think a really relevant screenshot might be this one here, which basically this tool allows lead organizations to create projects, and then other organizations to collaborate on those same projects by adding financial or implementation contributions, and then tracking those spatially. And then there's a lot of other tools focused on, kind of HVRA, or highly valued resource assets, and identifying those and prioritizing kind of where funding and where implementation efforts should be prioritized. So that's a really quick recap, and I don't want to go over. So I'll stop there and ask if anybody has any questions specifically about the Northeast portals or the Arizona Association Conservation District portal that Chris Lutz just showed, and we can also go offline and talk about this portal. But I want to thank everybody for the time, and really appreciate the opportunity to present with you.
Thank you very much. I think that was a really good presentation. And I know when we were planning this, there was questions about whether or not it was useful to show the Arizona portal, because it being a Western example, but really it's the software that we're talking about. It wouldn't matter what land it's on that you're displaying, because it's a tool that would be helpful for any state that association that would be wanting to track and wanting to communicate what it is that they're working on. And I saw, Leanne, you had a great comment in there, really liking the NRCS priorities and that information. I also mentioned that because I felt like a lot of the times, when we're talking about cohesive strategy, it's trying to get the same terminology, get on the same page, but a lot of it's really focused on communicating about what you're doing, and all of the activities that you're working on are within those 3 goal areas, and you hit those in the portal, as well as the assessment stuff that you covered. I noticed in one of the earlier ones that there was drinking water impacts in the initial report. And I wish we had more time to get into that, but if there was some way that you could put something in the chat about that, because we do have to move on. But I think being that water is a very key critical piece to the Northeast 20 states, and in developing this, I learned that very clearly. I would be nice to have you add something to that if you could.
No problem.
All right, thank you so much.